credits end when the final girl kills the main bad guy and the credits roll.
Welcome to the Final Girl Podcast. This is the podcast where we discuss and analyze your favorite horror movies. My name is Ryan Turner, and with me today I have Hank Oliver. He's back on the show, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. So glad that we've turned this into a visual medium.
Exactly.
So
now you got to worry about what you look
how
like.
ugly I am, which
Listen,
I was able to have some illusion there, I guess.
Everyone knows that the only ugly person on this show is me. None of my guests are ugly, except for maybe Jason. But I'm just kidding, Jason. We love you.
We love you, Jason.
But yeah, no.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be back. This is always fun. Good time.
Exactly. I'm excited to talk about this movie today because I got some questions.
I have many. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there's some questions I got about this movie because I'm a little lost.
I'm
on
lost
some of the
too.
things.
Yeah.
But
I'm
I think
absolutely lost.
I think we'll be able to get through it and talk about it and everything. I got a bunch of notes here for you.
Yeah, I honestly I think this is the most notes I've ever taken.
Yeah.
And we've done I feel like this is my third time on here. Every time I'm saying this is an incredible amount of notes,
and they just keep getting longer and longer
and longer.
Well, you suggested this movie. You're the one that brought this one to my attention. I actually hadn't heard of this film. If I can bring my thing up here.
Shout out to our friend Jimmy Joswick. He's the one who recommended it.
I want Jimmy on this show.
He needs
so
to come on.
badly.
I told him I was like, we should have done a 3-person panel, but timing.
That'd been great. Yeah.
Next one.
I love Jimmy.
Yes.
All right, so like I said, I got Hank. I haven't even told you guys what we're doing today. But if you've seen
it's a secret.
Yeah,
we're not going to tell you, and you have to figure it out by the end.
But no, if you guys have seen the title of the episode, you guys know that we are talking about 2019's Saint Maud. This is director and writer Rose Glass's first film, her debut film, and boy, is it a doozy of a film to start out with your career.
It is like, I actually didn't realize that this was her first film, and now I think that sort of influences a little bit of my thoughts about it in a way. But yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, honestly, I think with it being her first film, it gives me a lot of hope to see where she goes in the future.
Absolutely. Because
she came out so hard with this movie. Now, I don't think she didn't go as far as she could have gone with some things, but she definitely pushed the envelope in some cases, and I'm excited to see how far she's willing to push that envelope in future films.
There was a lot of restraint shown for sure. And I think, people can take from the name of the film alone, like the religious symbology of everything is so prevalent throughout it.
Right.
But it was so it was very tamed, but it was still very poignant in what it did. And it left me with a lot of questions. It left me with a lot of doubts. It left me thinking. I'm not sure what to think of some things. Some things I'm still thinking, like, why did they do that?
Right.
I think it's like, every time I'm on, I think we're doing very different movies from the traditional horror movie, and I sort of like that. But this is again another one. This is someone like this explores like something a little more horrific than a monster or something. It's sort of like.
This explores the monster inside of us.
The degradation of one's own psychology and then their own mind, or maybe not. Yeah. And I guess that's the question. Maybe this is something far more spiritual, and I think that they leave some inherent doubt there at the end.
Exactly.
I don't
There's
think,
a lot of doubt at the end.
There's a lot of doubt at the end.
So I don't know. I think the movie is wrapped up somewhat nicely. It definitely closes the chapter on Maud. Like, because the movie is about Maud. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This entire film, no one else matters, essentially, but her.
Yes.
And it definitely puts a nice little bow on the end of her chapter, but it leaves a lot else out there to be explored. I don't know, though, if I'd want more exploration in this world.
No,
but
I don't think there will be anything else to this.
No, I don't think there will either. This is a one and done film for sure.
Yeah, alpha to the omega on this one, but it still leaves a lot of questions, and I think that what's great about the way that she did direct the film is that there is that openness to the interpretation, and one is able to put in their own experience. And I think I think the realities are this film takes place in somewhere in the United Kingdom.
Right, somewhere in England. We don't know where exactly.
Possibility it's in Wales, but we never really know.
Yeah.
Like it is left incredibly ambiguous. But so like the influence of the Western world is really important.
It's everywhere, yeah.
Christendom. Christianity is this really central piece of it. And even more so than that, it's a very specific brand of Catholicism, I would say. And we're in North Central West Virginia. I'm an Italian American. Like Catholicism is a part of our everyday experience here, and more so than a lot of other places. So I think we were probably able to see more into these types of things than a lot.
Other people might see.
But it gets dark. It
gets dark. It
gets dark.
And there's also, I have that actually in my notes. There's darkness throughout. I'm going to talk on that when we start talking about the movie. But there's some dark scenes in this movie, and it took me kind of by surprise because I knew going into this. Actually, I didn't know a lot about this film. You mentioned it, and you were like, "Hey, let's do this movie," and I was like, "Okay, great, let's do it." I watched the trailer, and I was like, "Okay." Went into this blind, other than knowing the trailer, and there's some parts that shocked me.
Yeah, I hadn't even looked at the Wikipedia before I recommended it.
Exactly.
Because I just, going off what Jimmy said and like understanding the themes, I was like, this is something Ryan and I could talk about.
Oh, and we definitely can talk about this movie for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's just go ahead and hop into this. Like I said, guys, we're talking about Saint Maud, written and directed by Rose Glass. This film stars Morfydd Clark, who I don't know if she's in anything other than if this is her first role or if she's in anything like major. Maybe she might be a well-known British actor. I'm not sure.
She is a Welsh Swedish actress.
Okay.
I really don't think she has a lot of much cinematography or much of a portfolio behind her outside of that. But I do, again, the fact that she's Welsh is going to come into some later discussion.
There's a lot to that, yeah.
And that is where honestly most of my confusion around the film lies. But that's okay.
We'll talk about
We'll get into it.
We'll get into that. And then also stars Jennifer L, I think is how you say her last name.
That's what
what I'm going to go with.
I can't think of something better.
And so, like I said, this is Rose Glass's first film, her debut directorial premiere.
Jennifer L is an American actress.
She is an American actress, yes, because her character in the movie is from America.
Yeah,
so
they don't ever really which is another thing. This world is set in the UK, so it's got these rich accents. It's clearly not here. Mm-hmm. And then one of these central figures, these two really central figures in the film. One of them is an American, and I just was like, I would love to know if there's more significance as to why, and I just don't know.
It makes me harken back to our Parasite episode. To where that film, obviously solely based in Korea, with it's 100% Korean actors, 100% Korean crew, but there's so many Western influences, like with the Native American stuff, and It's just like
perceptions of
does
America.
Does the UK have so many perceptions of us, or like the rest of the world have a bunch of perceptions of us as like?
Well, they do,
and influences from us. I know they have perceptions of us. Don't get me wrong. I understand that, but I've never left the United States. I've never been able to travel, so I didn't know what the influences were elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, I'm really curious to maybe get some reading more. Again, this film has not been super. This is something we should probably discuss. This film was set to release right around the time of COVID starting.
Exactly. So it had a very limited release.
And so I think even when you're trying to read some critical review and analysis of it, that is sort of lacking compared to what you would see from a lot of other films of its caliber and quality.
Also, you even mentioned too, it's kind of hard to find this film.
Yes.
The only place we were able to find it was on Amazon with an Epic subscription.
Yeah. So if you're willing to do it, I do recommend Epic's. I think I got a 3-month trial for 99 cents a month. Mm-hmm. So I recommend it. Do it. Watch the film. I haven't reviewed Epic's other content. This episode brought to you by Epic.
By Epic's. Hey, reach out to me, Epic's. Let's go. Let's make
your bill.
Let's make a deal.
So that is the way that you should watch it. Again, not super easy to watch, but definitely worth it.
Yeah. So with that effect, spoilers from here on out, guys. Obviously, we're going to be talking about this movie in depth and analyzing it. So go check it out. This is another one of those films to where I think, honestly, you should watch it before you listen to this review, or not this review, but before you listen to this analysis of it, because you're going to be kind of lost, I think. Anytime you see Hank on this podcast, just know, go watch the movie before you listen to the podcast, because I bring Hank on for the deep movies. And this is definitely one of those movies with a lot of depth to it.
We're going deep.
We're going deep today. So definitely go check out this movie before you listen to this podcast, then come on back and listen to it. We're going to be here, regardless.
We're not going anywhere.
We're not going anywhere. We're gonna wait right here for you to go watch the movie. I don't know why I put up the praying hands. I think it's because we're talking about a religious film.
I found Jesus through it.
It makes sense. All right, let's hop into this movie, Hank. So
let's do it.
The movie opens on I love this scene. I love the opening scene because the movie opens on like a clump of hair.
Yeah.
It looks like, and there's just blood dripping from the hair into a pool on the ground. And we cut to our main character, Maud, who is covered in blood. She's sitting there, with her hands out to her side, covered in blood. This stoic look on her face.
You can definitely tell it's a hospital.
Yes.
Or some sort
She's
of,
in scrubs.
yeah,
Yeah,
she's
she's
in
wearing
scrubs.
scrubs.
Like it's definitely, that is a piece of like the tiles and everything about it. And I believe like she was on some sort of like operating table-ish.
It looked like she was in an operating room.
Thing.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it was very dark in there.
Dark blue.
Yeah, lots of blues.
Coloring. Very important.
And then she's looking shocked, and then she looks up at the ceiling, and there's a roach on the ceiling. Some people say it's a roach, some people say it's a beetle. I
initially was like, oh, it's a cockroach, and then like I was like, well, maybe it's a beetle, and the reason I do think it could be a beetle is just because of their connection to death,
right,
decay, and things like that.
But they
I
also
suppose
cockroaches
do
also
the same
have
thing.
that
I don't
too.
know.
Yeah.
So
But,
yeah,
we're gonna talk about the roach beetle a lot more here later on, I'm sure, because you would think that doesn't have a very central point to the movie, but I feel like it has a very important role.
it definitely does. I'm not sure I know what it is, but
I was like, I don't know what the roach means really, but we're gonna talk about
something.
it and try to figure something out with it.
We'll figure it out.
So we immediately cut from that to the most epic shot of boiling tomato soup I've ever seen.
Yeah, so that was like, it made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Actually, like it was like this visceral, like we went from seeing her hands covered in blood.
She's all covered in blood, everything, and there's blood dripping on the floor. Which, by the way, blood dripping in movies is probably one of my favorite things. I don't know why, especially like somber, like it's surprising dripping like this, because this is the first scene of the movie.
And maybe like your serial killer
And
instinct that is like
possibly, it's very possible.
aroused by that.
But like
that's
I
okay.
love watching films where like blood drips from fingertips, or like this one in this case like
Maybe,
matted hair. Yeah, it was
quite
I liked it. It was jarring. It's a very jarring way to open the film.
for sure.
But I thought it was done really well, because it's not overtly graphic to where you're just like, no.
And it didn't make sense at the beginning. You didn't
yeah.
understand it. There was no context provided to it. And luckily by the end, I think there was a good bit of context provided to the situation. And that's something we'll get into. But it was this really stark, cold open.
Extremely cold open, yeah. And that's, I think, honestly, one of my favorite things about the film is how little information it gives you. And you have to completely piece this thing together by yourself.
You have to do some work.
It's like Rose Glass was like, here's a 1,000-piece puzzle with 800 pieces. Figure out the rest of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it, for sure. And then we go from that to boiling tomato soup.
Boiling tomato soup. Which essentially is just a transition into into Maud's like grim life. She's,
it's this tiny apartment, like a one room,
like decrepit apartment.
Yeah. It was just something that like, I think, something important to understand in the UK, like housing is like a guaranteed right for like most people. So, she definitely is in some sort of like council housing or something like that. But it is something that was designed very deliberately to make you feel pity and discomfort.
Which you definitely do feel.
This twin-size bed in it. It's just, especially like as an American watching it, it is like a strong juxtaposition to the way we live.
It really truly is, because when you say one-bedroom apartment, you mean legitimately one-bedroom apartment. Like, I lived in a one-bedroom apartment when I lived down in Beckley, but it had technically 2 different rooms, a kitchen, living room area, and then my bedroom was the one bedroom.
Yeah.
This is legitimate one room. There's nowhere else to go. There's not even a bathroom.
I believe
she
it
has
has
a
a
communal
shared
bathroom.
lavatory,
Yeah.
So that's another peek into this girl's life.
Yeah, she's living kind of in squalor here.
Yeah, and so we start and we look at her too, and looking at her, she's very they made her very homely.
They did.
But she's a very beautiful girl.
She is. She's very pretty.
That is something that they sort of touch on throughout, is like she is very beautiful. But, as we learn more about the character, it's very clear that her modesty and the simplicity is something that she strives for, and it's something that's important. Looking around the way that she lives and the way that her apartment is furnished, it's very modest, it's humble, simple necessities.
It fits with the whole Saint Maud vibe here, because she's definitely trying to give up those more extravagant, frivolous,
no frivolities, nothing of excess, living a simple, devoted life.
And that's where she's at.
Yeah.
And so from there, we get a very juxtaposed look into our second main character, Amanda's life.
Yes.
Because Amanda is who Maud is now caring for. She's a hospice nurse. So she's coming into this extravagant mansion, essentially, that's full of like ornate, decorations and paintings and all this beautiful, like...
Yeah, like just picture your traditional like English estate home and all the antiquities that
all you guys out there who really... What's that... that new show that everyone's losing their minds over on Netflix? The not Buckingham or what? There's some. I don't remember what it's called. There's some English show right now.
Bridgerton.
Bridgerton, that's what it is.
Which is
yes.
like a really bad show.
I'm
gonna say it. I'm gonna say it right here. I'm gonna declare it.
You're
for the
going
world.
on. You're going on record.
Bridgerton is a beautiful show filled with beautiful people and beautiful colors, and they're fucking a lot. I wanted you to get that explicit rating right out of the way.
We're definitely probably gonna get it, so don't worry.
Yeah, and but it has the dumbest plot I've ever seen in a show. But it's filled with beautiful people doing beautiful things, and so like I watched it. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
I'm not gonna lie.
I tuned in.
I watched it. No, I've had a lot of people say I should watch it, but I've not seen it. But that's beside the point. I'm just trying to get across, what this place looks like.
But before that, right when she was leaving her home, it was sort of we're not really sure if it was to a diary or to prayer. She noted that she had a terrible sickness in her stomach, made worse by menstruation.
Yes,
a woman's punishment.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to touch on that later, and I have it in my notes, so I'll come back to it. Because I've also heard several differing opinions on a certain topic we'll talk about.
Okay.
But regardless, she shows up at this new not caretaker, the person she's going to be taking care of. Her name's Amanda. She shows up to her house, and as she's showing up, the old hospice worker is leaving.
Yes.
And I love the not so subtle way that this lady's just like, because Nod's like, how is she? And the woman's just like, she's a bit of a.
I wrote that down. Yeah.
So it's just like, yeah. So it's straight up just, okay, here we are. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we know that Amanda's not particularly that nice of a person, I guess, but to be said for that, she also has stage 4 lymphoma.
Lymphoma of the spine. She's 49 years old.
Exactly.
What did they describe her as? A dancer, choreographer, minor celebrity. Creative types aren't of her interest because they're often self-involved.
Yep. It's like the exact opposite of everything Maud is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This pious mouse of a person as she has tried to become. They definitely create that parallel there from the start. Like 100%
there's a juxtaposition, and that's another thing too I like about this movie a lot is there's so much juxtaposition. We go from, Maud's quaint little home to Amanda's gorgeous mansion.
Yeah.
And then Maud is a very quaint, quiet person. Amanda's this very extravagant, frivolous person.
And something that I think may tie into some of the themes, and it may just be a matter of geography, but one of the things is this mansion is on the top of a hill. So part of it is for Maud to get there is for her to ascend this staircase.
Yep.
And then even leaving from her apartment, the way that those shots are angled of the alley, it's always her going up or down. And so I'm very curious. I'm sure that'll be a final discussion, but
again, we can talk about it as we go along because that is something actually I wanted to mention because, again, harkening back to our Parasite episode, there was a lot of up and downs relating to physical geography as well as societal.
Yes, exactly. So
means.
but in this sense, I was taking it into a much more spiritual context of her, how close she was, her atoneness.
Yes.
To,
so it's just a cool way to think about how people can take the same concept and change the meaning of it.
Yeah.
Like that. But yeah, we get to meet Amanda here, and like you were saying, she is 49 years old. She used to be a dancer, choreographer, minor celebrity. She's an American. She has stage 4 lymphoma, and she, doesn't want to die.
No, she's totally someone who, in her mind, still has a lot of life and a lot of energy left in her.
And that's what's killing her, I think, the most is that, not physically, but mentally is, she can't do all the things she used to do because she's now wheelchair bound.
Right. She's bound to a wheelchair. It was very clear that she had this vibrant, great social life that is just sort of diminished as she's in the end of her life.
Right.
The end stages of her disease and that's sort of, but so someone like Maud is very drawn to someone like that.
Right. Even though she said, I don't want these extravagant, I'm not drawn to people like this. You can tell right off the bat she's very much drawn to Amanda.
She's drawn to her like a moth to a flame. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One is, I think, as they said, she's a celebrity. Humans are drawn to that type of celebrity, but also as someone who's very devoted. Any type of someone at the end stage of their life, the proselytization opportunities are rife.
And that's 100% what's going on here because we very much have this dynamic to where Amanda doesn't believe in God or an afterlife or anything. And there's this little moment they have where she admits to the fact that she's scared to die because she's afraid of what comes next.
She says, "What do I see? Do I see anyone? Is there anything?" And she very well vocalizes that.
Yeah.
She makes it very clear that she's uncomfortable with the thought of death.
Yeah, and she asks Maud too. She's like, well, you used to be a nurse, right? And she says, yes, I was. She says, were you around death a lot? And she says, yes. And so she's kind of just like,
Yeah.
well, what do you think happens afterwards? And that's where we kind of get into this whole situation where Maud explains that, she has now found her faith. It's been about a year or so since she's left the hospital. She's found her faith. Amanda even remarks on the fact that it was such a short amount of time has been since she's became this saint.
Person.
Yeah. And she kind of explains, we might not know all the answers now, but God is always with us. He's always around us, and he will always be there for us even after we're gone.
Absolutely. It's something, I'm not a super religious person, so I don't, it was also like a learning experience to try and see a lot of like how she behaved around it. And it was really, really interesting to see how she was behaving around Amanda and someone who was in the end of her life and had a lot of questions about those things. And they're very human questions.
Exactly.
They're questions that all of us have. And I think, matter your spiritual conviction. I think it's something that you always ask and think about.
I think
but Maud didn't have a questioning.
Right.
There was no doubt in her mind, I felt, at that point.
She was very much set in what her answer was. There was no question in her mind. And that's another thing too this movie does so well is Maud's descent, or not really descent, but like her falling out of her faith happens moderately, and then it's over. Yeah,
it's quite interesting. But like more to Amanda's character, when she's given her pills, she's taking them with a cocktail, taking shots of Valium,
and she's constantly puffing down cigarettes. Yeah.
What? When the end is nigh?
That's what I was thinking too the whole time. I was like,
why
you know
not?
what? You know you're gonna die. Why not live life the way you want to live it? So
1000%.
Exactly. We also have Maud does a little bit of research on Amanda, kind of finds out more about her past. And then one thing I wanted to note here, when Maud's looking through Amanda's like dance belongings, she finds posters of her old dance thing and everything. One of the signs has the name for the show, I guess, was 666. I don't know if you caught that or not, but I wanted to be like, do you think this is a thing of foreshadowing, or do you think it's just a sign of Amanda's lack of faith, that she's openly mocking, religion with one of her dance numbers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think that that's something that sort of drew her to it, and I think she took it as a challenge at that point.
Absolutely. That's why I see this as it's Maud. This is her calling. She's 100% here to make Amanda believe in God before she passes.
It is divinely ordained. That is why God set her on this path, and that is why she is there. But these posters, they're all very erotic.
Yes.
And then I don't know if you noticed, but the last one, Amanda had cuts. The poster had cuts all over it, which is something
I noticed that one.
We'll see in Maud herself later on. There's definitely some importance there. But right before that, they were giving Maud was giving Amanda a bath. And her cross came out, and it had a token of a saint on it.
Right.
And she asked, "Who's your saint?" And she said Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
Who, despite biblical scholars, we are not, but people have a lot of discussion about this. But I think the common understanding is she was a reformed whore, and I say that in a very sex positive way. Sex work is work.
Yeah.
This podcast firmly believes that.
Truthfully, yes. And I do.
But I think that's another thing that's very important. She's this reformed woman of sin.
Exactly. And that's what I wanted to bring up there, because I do think that makes a very strong, hold in this movie, considering Maud's past, which we piece together slowly throughout the film, but it's very much poignant that she worships Mary Magdalene. Yeah.
She makes a way. She said, I had to special order it online.
Because she's like, oh, I didn't know they made those. She's like, I did special order it online. Yeah. So it's kind of like a side comment, like no one really worships her, but like it's special to me.
Yeah, she venerates, Mary Magdalene as her saint, and that's a very common practice in Catholicism. But again, Mary Magdalene, not a common one to have.
Exactly. So it's more like usually like Saint Peter or Yeah, I also don't know
all these things.
I'm not Catholic, so I don't know all the saints, but like
there's a lot of them.
There are.
Yeah. But see, that was I just felt that was really like telling of the character that Maud had in her own mind. which I think is another thing is, she's the one who clearly has classified herself that way and found that parallel between herself and Mary Magdalene.
And I'm glad you bring up her own mind, because there's so much of this movie that you're questioning what is real and what's not.
Absolutely.
Especially towards the end of the film.
Especially towards the end.
Yeah. And I love, too, the fact that Maud's narrating the film. Because that sets it even more in stone that this whole thing is pretty much inside her own head.
Yep.
So it makes it even more of an unreliable narrator, especially as she starts to spiral. But yeah, Maud, we get this establishment between Maud and Amanda where they're taking care of her and everything. And then the guy's name is Richard, I believe, right?
I don't remember his name and I didn't write it down.
Okay.
But some gentleman.
Yeah, some gentleman shows up. And so Maud kind of, gets ushered out of the house that night and everything. So she can go out for a night on the town while this man, I believe his name is Richard, is here entertaining Amanda. Yeah. And we'll get back to him in a second, but I want to talk about her night out on the town.
Yes.
Because the first time we see the town, she's kind of like walking around and she laments, why is Amanda here?
Yep.
Is she stuck here like I am? Why wouldn't she be somewhere else? And then we also get this scene with her interacting with a homeless man. Excuse me. And she gives him change, but then she goes to a diner where she sees a man putting his glass eye in.
Yes.
And she's giving him like a side eye. And my whole time I'm thinking about this is, Maud, she pretends to be this pious person, but she's very much judging these people underneath.
Absolutely.
The entire time she's judging everyone.
The basis of everything she does is judging someone else's relationship with God. Right. So it is really, truly a pious Maud, where we have, her way is what she considers to be the right way. And but she'll get into it more and more, but she truly feels that she is connected to God in a very different way.
Exactly. She's very much a holier than thou kind of person.
Absolutely. And I think like this town, to describe it, it's this old you should have watched the movie before you listened. But it is this old like abandoned beach town. And the biggest imagery of it that stuck out to me was I constantly walked past this arcade called Coney Island.
I'm glad you I was gonna bring that up too. Yeah.
It was like, it was very much like a boardwalk looking thing. But it was the only thing. You see it
like several times.
Yeah.
There's a Ferris wheel, I think, too. But yeah, it's literally, she's living on like a boardwalk almost.
Yeah, it is darkness, but this arcade boardwalk style thing with the bright Vegas style lights.
Right. And honestly, I was going to bring this up anyway later on, so I'm glad you were talking about it now, because I think truly, when you look at it at the depth of what this film is trying to represent, you've got, you said it, the mansion's up on a hill, Maud's living down in like the dumps. This city, or this town, I guess I should say, is essentially Earth and the embodiment of sin.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it.
Because everything that kind of happens that's sinful happens within the town.
Like the grotesqueness of humanity.
Exactly.
These people,
And it's like you've got that descent between Amanda's house to Maud's house, but along the way, you kind of go to Earth and you see what humanity's actually like. Because where Amanda's at, it's one side of things. Where Maud's living, it's a different side of things. The town is reality.
Yep.
The town is real, and it's actual humanity.
That's a very good point.
So that's just how I kind of envision it.
Yeah.
And then again, too, you bring up the whole like Coney Island thing. It's another just reference to like America.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm like, man, like that's like a very American name. Like, I wonder.
I was like, if I hadn't
know the history of it, but
if I didn't know this was a British film, like with all the British accents, I wouldn't. I'd have been like, are we in New York right now? Like,
right.
But everyone there's British, so no, we're not in New York.
Not in New York.
So Maud's out on the town, but then she eventually ends up coming back to the house where she finds Amanda completely wasted. Richard and her are arguing, and Richard kind of starts apologizing, saying, "I'm sorry, I thought she could take her liquor. She used to be able to handle it so much better." And it's important to note they're watching one of Amanda's old videos, like one of her old dance videos. And honestly, I think this is truly the kind of the catalyst of why she got so drunk, is because it just set her off. She was like, I can't do this anymore. And so
she had to watch what she was, her life as it was. And she clearly relishes that, that vibrancy that she once had. And when they come back, they hear Richard talking to Amanda and saying, why don't you come back to London?
Yes.
So it's clear that she still had this life there, but chose to sort of end her days isolated in a way, which sort of adds to that bleakness of this town, because in the U.S. also, you would never have a coastal town that wasn't vibrant. I mean, the coasts are the most
It's
vibrant
the most vibrant places
there are. There's like, I mean, everyone is going on vacation and things like that. You couldn't have a place.
It's very bleak and grim.
It was
here.
desolate. Yeah, it was clearly in decay. And he's begging her to go back to London, and she's choosing to stay in this coastal town in England, Wales. We're not really sure, but somewhere in the UK. Yeah. So it was interesting.
Yeah, and so we have that dynamic between Richard and her, and then we never see Richard again. He leaves at this point, and he's just like, he gives her a kiss. He's like, okay, I'm out. Yeah, and so Maud kind of takes care of Amanda. She does throw up at this point and everything, and they kind of cleans her off and all this stuff. And then just we have this moment after she puts her to bed where Maud's walking up the stairs, and because at this, I don't remember if it was at this point or earlier in the film, but at some point Amanda asks her about her religion, about God and everything, and she kind of explains, when she prays to God, she can feel him like inside her and all around her. And here's where the movie, this is one of my main issues with it. I get the point of it, but this is where they take the idea of God and make it sexual.
Well, but I think that is actually an important piece of historic Catholicism, particularly for women. And so she's talking about like why she left the hospital, and she says that's what God wanted. That was the path God set on her, and we don't know at that point really what happened. But I'm trying to like review my notes at the same time. So she's acknowledging it, and so she's describing this relationship with God, and it gets erotic. Yes. She says she shivers, and pulsing warm and good fills her. Mm-hmm. But I think like there's a lot of Catholic art, particularly throughout history, like the Agony and the Ecstasy that's a film, but it's also the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa, I believe, is a famous Catholic painting, which describes this particularly for women. And that's, I think a pejorative piece of the church's history, but that is sort of the relationship with God. Like nuns are married to Jesus, their sexuality and their humanity is tied to it in that way. But female sexuality has often been considered a sin. Right. I mean, the term hysteria, hyster, is the Latin word for uterus.
Okay.
So, like you go back in time, and so like I think female sexuality is very, it's forbidden, and it's very
taboo.
It's very taboo, but at the same time, like she is clearly she's climbing the stairs and she's having an orgasm.
Right, she's climbing up and
she is climaxing as she reaches the climax.
The climax of the stairs, right? Yeah, it's just, and that happens several times. I'm just like, I wanted to ask about what your thoughts are on that. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't know all that stuff.
Yeah, but I think it's an attunement to her relationship with God is that it fills her with an ecstasy. So I think you could look at it in two ways. One is the more literal sense of like she is having some psychosomatic reaction to her faith, and it manifests itself in orgasm. Or they're just saying, because the mystery of the female orgasm, that is just the spiritual bliss that she experiences can only be likened to things that we can comprehend in terms of like sexuality. Right. That we can understand these pleasures, what is life's greatest pleasures and feelings. And I think maybe they're trying to do that. But I do think that for the character of Maud, it is more, she actually seems to be having these
actual,
she's having these feelings, and they're based on, she perceives them at least to be based on her faith and to stem from that.
And I think you make a good point. I think they're trying to personify that whole idea of, the ecstasy within God. Right. In this way. So
becoming at one with God. And that's something they commonly said is he's all around us. I feel him all around me. He speaks to me.
And that is well to where instead of saying I feel him all around me, the first thing she says is I feel him inside of me and then all around me. So yeah, it's a very sexual way of looking at it, but you're right.
But it's something so interesting the director does because like again, America's a very Protestant nation, very Puritan nation, so sexuality itself is very taboo. But like it makes you uncomfortable, and that's 100% what she intended to do was make this girl's relationship with God uncomfortable for everyone else,
and it succeeds because there's several times in this movie where I legit was like, I'm a little uncomfy now. There's one point which I have in my notes, which we're going to talk about, that I don't get squeamish easy, but there's one point where I legit was just like, no.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get there.
Another important part of Catholic history.
Another important part, yeah, because we're actually starting to get into that where, Maud punishes herself.
I say that they should never say that. They never say expressly that she's Catholic. I can just identify a lot lot of.
They never do express the fact that she's Catholic, but there's a lot of Catholicism references. Yes, so
1000%.
yeah. And this is not us hating on Catholicism. It's just we're talking about what the director has done with this film.
Exactly.
I'm trying to remember what happens next because the next thing I have is Carol.
The next thing is she prays.
Is that the prayer scene? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And before she prays, she's back at her home and she opens up a bag of popcorn.
That's right. Yes. Okay. And dumps
pours
some
out
of it
the
out.
kernels, and then gets down on her knees on top of the popcorn kernels, which is another historically significant piece of the self-flagellation or the experiencing of pain through prayer brings you closer to the suffering of Christ.
Right. And the only thing I can relate to this that I've seen in cinema that I can recall at least is from the Da Vinci Code.
Yep.
Yep, where he's
around his thigh,
whipping himself and everything. Yeah. And also at this point too, this is where we can bring this up here now as well. Before she does that, we see she's laying in her bed, and we see her stomach, and it has marks all over it.
Yes.
How did you take these marks? Were they stretch marks to you, or were they self-inflicted wounds?
They were self-flagellation. Other examples of self-inflicted wounds. Some sort of self-harm. Now, I didn't know, they never do anything with them in her religious context in the film. So I do wonder if in this previous existence that she had, where she would have considered herself promiscuous, if this was just some other way that self-harm exhibited in her. And after this, spiritual awakening, it took more religious tones, but she just has a history of self-harm.
Right.
But, again, like to that poster of Amanda, there was the poster scars all over. Very similar looking.
But I bring that up because this is one of the ones I saw online that was divisive. People were thinking, oh, no, it's self-harm scars. Yes, that's what I thought as well, too. But then someone brought up the idea that potentially these are, postnatal stretch marks. And she had a miscarriage at one point. And that might bring about the whole discussion at the beginning about menstruation and things like that, because she might have changed over to here because she, think God was punishing her for her past ways because she was very promiscuous in her past, which we'll get to. And that possibly could have led to a accidental pregnancy, leading to the miscarriage. Then the idea in the hospital happening and all of that's just like a big old God's telling you to change your ways.
That's very possible. I definitely didn't take it that way. But I can definitely see someone would draw that. I still took the menstruation more just a discussion of the general...
Of women's suffering,
women's suffering and their punishment for whatever.
Right.
But I guess that's definitely a possibility. I would say that to me, when I saw the scars, they were much more deliberate and much clearer than I would assume a stretch mark.
Right. That's how I took it too. I watched it and I was like, okay, those are self-harm marks. But I was just wanted to ask you about that. Take. Yeah, because I've seen it online where people are talking about, no, those are marks from a pregnancy and everything. So, but it fits, I think, because we never hear it all about a possibility of her being pregnant.
No.
And so I think it fits more in the narrative for those to be self-harm marks, especially considering everything that happens later on, than it would be a pregnancy.
Yeah.
Because I think if it was a pregnancy, we would see something into that.
Yeah,
you wouldn't.
There would be more to that.
You would bring more of that into the film. I think is more backstory into Maud's character versus just being like, oh, okay, there's some stretch marks from a pregnancy, but we're not going to talk about it at all.
Yeah,
because
no, the history of self-harm and the continuation of that throughout the film, I think it
fits more. Yeah. So yeah, she prays
in a place where people wouldn't typically see it, like right around her groin and her waist. So I stand by that.
And again, too, I think the area of where it is fits with the narrative of she's doing it as reprimand for her past ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
So
they're definitely in her sexual regions.
Mm-hmm. So Maud prays, and then some time passes on, and we see this relationship with Maud and Amanda start to grow a little bit. They definitely become, a lot more open to the relationship, and they become closer to each other because in the beginning they're very kind of standoffish, and Maud's very awkward and quiet, but then she begins to blossom a little bit around Amanda, and
they definitely become comfortable.
They become comfortable with each other and very close. And then Carol enters the mix. And then Carol comes into the mix. Carol is a woman who, from what we learned through the movie, is someone that Amanda has hired for sex.
Yeah, and that's so I even have a point in here where I ask, like, is she a sex worker outright, or is it more just of like a sugar baby-ish type situation? Because it does seem, at least,
It
that
seems that
Carol
way too,
enjoys
yeah.
her company.
Right.
In some manner. Now, I have some issues with Carol's character.
Okay,
Do
go
you want
ahead.
to talk about them now or later?
Let's talk about it now. We're talking about her, so let's go.
The film represents Carol to me as, and this isn't a criticism. I mean, maybe it is. I'm not really sure how I feel about it, I guess. We'll talk it through. It gets a little serious, but like the way that she is perceived by Maud is definitely as if this serpent in the Garden of Eden.
Yes.
She is this temptation. She is the embodiment of sin itself. And so she has this, I mean, she's a beautiful woman. She has this appearance. She wears dark featured eye makeup, but she's also a black character.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like they literally create this darkness around her by her dress, by her appearance. And then they did it like, they made the black person evil. In Maud's mind.
Maud's mind, yes.
Yeah, and that's definitely in Maud's mind.
There's no indication that Carol's an evil person, but
to Maud, she most certainly
to the
is.
film, she is 100% an evil character.
She is what is standing between Amanda and salvation. I just thought that was an interesting choice.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm like, maybe I'm just overthinking that because of the social zeitgeist, like the conversations that we're constantly having, these great conversations. It's probably stupid, but I just wanted to note,
it's definitely worth noting that
the one character of color in the film.
You're not wrong. The one person of color in the film is portrayed as the evilest person in the film.
Yeah. Though she, in fact, is not evil. Right. I mean, at least nothing that the film actually portrays.
Portrayed in terms of Maud's
From
mentality.
Maud's perspective,
right.
She most certainly is.
And that's interesting. I definitely hadn't thought of that. Honestly, when I first saw Carol, the reason I first thought Maud didn't like her is because she reminded her of Maud's past self.
That's definitely probably true. I mean, she wore a lot of makeup. So, like, again, Maud is portrayed, she's a beautiful woman, but she's very homely. She's not wearing makeup. She doesn't have piercings or anything like that. And Carol is the opposite of that.
She's the exact opposite.
Heavy makeup, dressed in,
very fancy outfits. And honestly, I truly believe, as Carol's character progresses on with the relationship with Amanda, I think Maud gets jealous.
Absolutely.
I don't think.
Well, and they say that at the They talk about it.
They talk about it, but I don't. I think Maud believes she's kicking Carol out, which, long story short, we're going to cover this obviously, but like just so we can kind of clear the gap here, if you've not seen the film. Eventually Maud confronts Carol and throws her out and says, for Amanda's well-being, you cannot be here anymore, and kicks her out of the house. But to kind of close that gap there, I think in Maud's mind, she's removing Carol from the house, just like you said, because Carol's the snake in the Garden of Eden. Yeah. She's removing Carol because Carol is an evil presence in Amanda's recovery.
Right.
And she's in her path to glorification.
But part of it was the entire context of their relationship together had been them.
Right.
In this giant mansion, the two of them. Maud lives there. Even though she has this apartment in town, she is a live-in caretaker. Mm-hmm. So their lives are completely filled with each other, and then this other character appears within that. So I think it's probably a combination of one, this person is a blockade perceived to her for her salvation, which is this divine mission that God has set her on.
Right.
Which is what she truly believes. But then also, this person's coming between her and her friend. The only human connection she seems to really have.
Which is really the only connection she has, which we'll loop back around to that later. But
I mean, she really has no one else, and then this other person comes into play, and it's just And not only that, I mean, she's a very religious person and clearly very conservative, and the nature of Amanda and Carol's relationship is sexual.
Right.
So it's not only is she a force of her partying, but she's engaging in a homosexual lifestyle and blah 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 blah. It's just a not great situation.
Right. And I wanted to ask too, because you bring up the fact that she's kind of jealous of the relationship between Carol and Amanda solely because Amanda is like the only person that Maud has in her life.
Yeah.
Do you think she's jealous? Obviously, that is an issue there, but do you think she's also jealous because she wants that relationship with Amanda that Carol has?
Absolutely. I think she's
Is there a sexual undertone
there's
between
absolutely
there?
a sexual undertone, and I think that's something that the director did really fantastically, is saying that, despite your religious convictions and despite all these, you can convert and you can do everything you have, but inherently...
Right.
your orientation and your sexuality, your human sexuality, is still persisting. Now, she may manifest it herself in this very different way and say, oh, like, I just have interest in her spiritual salvation and her closeness and her atonement to God, where, Maud clearly has a very sexual connection with her
Right.
spirituality. So I think it's all intertwined. But there was a scene, and it was the first time Amanda called Maud her savior. They were just like doing stretches or
Yeah.
something, and she was talking about how God. She was telling Amanda how God manifests Himself within her,
Right. It was during that scene. Yeah.
and it climaxed when they touched hands.
Yes.
So the sexual tension is clearly there. I mean, we never really. I don't think we ever get like explicit details of Amanda's past sexual life. We do
Well,
get a
we
glimpse of
have Richard, and we're not quite sure what the connection is there between those two. I mean,
I honestly look at her more of a
producer?
libertine.
Right.
Like, I feel like she's not a lesbian and she's not this. She's just someone who enjoys the pleasures of life all around her. And with Maud, we don't really know much about her past. We get a little bit of a glimpse later on into some her sexuality, I suppose. But yeah, so I thought that was interesting. And that's also the first time that Amanda calls Maud her savior.
Yeah.
And that's right before Carol shows up.
and I think the idea of Amanda calling Maud her savior, I don't know if she ever truly means it. I think solely the entire time she's meaning it to mock her.
I think
She's mocking her piousness.
I'm not sure. I mean, I definitely see that.
Yeah.
I definitely see that. And that's one of those things that, like, I just don't I don't know myself. Or is Amanda just that type of person who knows, like, later on there's a scene where she has a party, and, the way she's so vibrant at parties is
Right.
is that part of her charisma is to make these connections with people? I just simply don't know.
Yeah. And
You're probably right, though. I mean, like, there probably is some mocking to it.
because obviously later on in the movie, the my savior becomes a mocking phrase.
Right.
But the first time she says it, I'm wondering if there's some genuinity to it.
Well, I mean,
Genuinity?
they
Genuineness? I don't know.
visibly appeared to have orgasms together.
Right.
So I'm not, I don't know. And she, and they sort of touch that, and she is very dismissive of it later on. So maybe this is just part of a game to her, because as she says, she's at the end of her life. She's bored.
So she's just trying to make,
Every day's the same. Let me, let me fuck with the religious girl.
Right. Does she see this religious person
Yeah.
and think, she's so far into her ways, I could have some fun with this by pretending, to do the same
Exactly.
thing, because we actually get that in a scene after we meet Carol later on in the next day or so. They're sitting in front of the TV watching one of Amanda's old, I believe they were watching one of her old dance shows. They
Yeah.
might not have been. I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
But they pray.
Yeah.
Because she brings Maud
She
brings
turns
her
it
lunch.
off.
Yeah, she
Yes,
turns
yes,
off the TV, and they begin to pray. And Maud begins to climax, and Amanda
Yeah.
follows right along with her. And she's like, I can feel him in me. I can feel his presence.
Yeah.
And so she goes right along with it. And we obviously know this is just an act.
Yeah.
Like, she's
This is
solely just doing it to fuck with her.
Right.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's just one of those. It's just one of those things, and the messing with Maud continues on further when Amanda gives her the book of William Blake.
Yes.
The biography of William Blake, because for those who don't know, William Blake was an English poet who his work was very centered around religion, but it was also very much like, hatred of organized religion.
It was very dismissive of organized religion.
Yes.
And I actually, like my sort of mentor, I work for a university, and my mentor is like one of the foremost William Blake scholars. And I meant to call him, but I didn't have a chance because I'm going to tell him to watch it because it's so interesting. But William Blake's art, he was a poet, and that's sort of where I knew him
That's
most.
where, as an English teacher, that's where I knew him from. Yeah,
But he also has a prolific art career.
okay.
Yeah.
So all those paintings in the book then were
those
done
were all
by, those
William
were all
Blake's
his.
works.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know until
Yeah.
today that he was an artist. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what is his most famous, like the chimney sweep or tiger burning
The
bright.
tiger and the lamb are probably his,
tiger,
which
yeah. I mean, again, like religion is the central tone of all of these things.
honestly, thinking into this now, I'm just now thinking this up, because I actually just read those poems in my class the other day.
Nice.
It fits the whole motif of this movie because you have the lamb and you have the tiger, and you can look at that because for those who, I'm sorry, I'm going to be an English teacher for a second. For those who don't know, William Blake wrote 2 books, Songs of Innocence, Songs of Experience. Songs of Innocence included the lamb, and Songs of Experience included the tiger.
Yeah.
And the lamb's all about, like, oh, little lamb, you are God's innocent creature. You are, a beautiful thing. The tiger is very much like, did the same God who made the lamb make you? How is that possible that the same God can make something so innocent and sweet, make something so evil and fierce? It's like, what thy chain, what thy hammer. I love the not graphic imagery, but the very hard kind of like imagery in it when the lamb's very soft and gentle.
Absolutely.
But with these poems, especially considering the fact that William Blake is prevalent in this movie, you can take it one of 2 ways. You can take it as the lamb is Maud, the tiger is Amanda, or what I think is honestly probably more possible, it's both Maud. You have
that's
pious
very
Maud
true.
as the lamb, and you also have, old Maud as the tiger.
But at the end, even in her piety, I think Maud embodies the tiger by the end of the film. So I
definitely think she comes back around. I think it starts out tiger, walks into lamb, and then goes back.
It is really interesting. And again, like William Blake, it's not something I know a ton about. I know he was a poet that focused a lot on religion, and his art is quite prolific. I recommend you look at some of his art, beyond even what is in the film, because it's like, it's a little disturbing. Like the way he uses color and darkness it's quite bizarre and different. But she inscribes that book.
Yeah.
And she says, "To my savior."
To my savior. Mm-hmm.
Maud. She draws angel
wings around it. Yeah.
The inscription. So,
I don't know.
So
I think
that's another thing where I sort of had to question, is Amanda mocking her? And even if she is mocking her, is she doing it just does she still have a sincere connection to her? And this is just the way that her charismatic personality, this someone who is a minor celebrity, loves to party, loves to socialize.
Right.
She can join in and sort of be this social chameleon when she's needed to. But I mean, she gave her quite a thoughtful gift.
She did, yeah.
In a way. So I'm just not really, I don't know. Like, it just leaves me to question a lot.
I think it's a backhanded compliment. I think my little savior, my sweet savior, whatever she calls her, I think it is a backhanded compliment. I think the entire time Amanda is, undermining Maud,
right,
giving her a book of William Blake paintings.
Yeah.
Because if you know what we just talked about, she even reads the line about how much he
hated. She
hated
does.
organized
She reads
religion.
it out loud. And I wrote it down somewhere, but I can't find it.
And then it's corresponded to in the movie, correlated with Carol walking in and popping open a bottle of champagne. Right as Maud turns to a picture of the devil, Carol pops the champagne and spills it all over the place.
Right.
So I don't know. I think it's supposed to be. In my opinion, I think we're supposed to look at it as Amanda's mocking her the entire time.
Amanda's mocking her. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still stand by that the connection is complicated.
Yeah. And you're making me think, man, because it definitely seems that way as well later on, because there's moments in here where Amanda kind of has her redemption, where she's like, don't take anything I say too seriously. And then she apologizes in the film for all the stuff that she's done to Maud.
It's easy to apologize for things when you're dying.
You're not wrong. So,
when you're drawing your last breaths, it's quite easy to just say whatever.
Yeah,
and again, like, I don't think that Amanda is a star character. I don't think she necessarily has much in terms of redeemable characteristics. But I do think that I don't necessarily think that her relationship was entirely mocking.
Yeah,
I just think that she is someone who, there's just one of those people that people like magnetically like to be around because they are able to make you feel so connected.
Right.
And that can sometimes be a very lonely existence, which I think is something they echo with Amanda.
It echoes with both of them because they're both very lonely people.
They're both very lonely people. And but clearly, Amanda has this vibrant social circle. These people love to just orbit around her. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I don't know if it's cut and dry, and I think that it's definitely something that is never answered deliberately.
Yeah, I didn't realize until coming into this.
We're going to need the director to call in.
Okay, yeah. We're gonna, Ms. Glass, we're going to need you to call us, please, or, leave a comment on the YouTube video that's going to be out there. Something. Let us know what your meanings were here. But regardless, we just covered a whole section of this movie. We're going to go back to the party here in a minute, but before we do, I want to talk about joy.
Modern perversion of a truly spiritual life. I found it. That's what William Blake says.
Okay.
Yeah. It is
Modern perversion of a truly spiritual life.
is what organized religion is.
Which, again, fits the motif of this film. So, I mean, it makes sense. But let's talk about Joy for a second here. Okay, Joy is a character that we meet in town. Maud is walking through town one day, and we hear from the background, "Hey, Katie."
Hey,
Hey, Katie. And as an audience member, you're like, who the fuck's Katie?
Who the fuck is Katie? I still don't know who Katie is, if we're being real. Like, I don't know who Maud is. I don't know who Katie is.
And we come to find this is Maud. Maud's old name is Katie.
Yeah.
Which...
So
again,
I legit Googled, because, like, so my name is Henry, but people call me Hank, and that's like a
Right.
nickname, like Bill for William. And I was like, well, maybe people in the UK call Catherine's Maud. I don't know. And they don't. So let me save you those keyboard clicks. They don't.
Do people in the UK call Catherine Maud?
I was like, is that a nickname? It's not.
Well, okay, so we'll break that down here in a second because there's definitely something to her name change. But Joy is a person who used to work with Maud back at the hospital. And so she kind of like catches up with her for a second, says, "Oh, how have you been? What are you doing?" And Maud tells her she's a personal caregiver now, which kind of throws Joy off. Joy's like,
what?
Do they know? And we're like, wait, do they know what?
Do they know what?
Do they know what?
They know
And we kind of get a little bit more of a backstory here to where Maud's just like, yes, they know, they're aware. And she's like, I'm surprised they're still letting you, be a nurse.
Yeah.
And so we now know something's happened, and it's kind of tying back to the first scene of the movie. We just don't know what exactly has happened yet. It's just more harkening on the fact that Maud we now kind of can put the two and two together that Maud's killed her patient.
Yes. So something grievous has happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we get this kind of rekindling between the two of them where they kind of talk for a little bit. And it ends with Joy giving Maud, a.k.a. Katie, her phone number and says, if you ever feel lonely or want to get a drink or talk or whatever, just give me a phone call. Yeah.
Yep.
So that'll come back into play later, but I want to talk about the name change now because my thoughts on the name change. First and foremost, on surface level, you have Maud's past life, Katie. Mm-hmm. She shirked that name because she didn't want to be associated with it anymore.
Right.
She is now changed as the person, so therefore she needs to change her name and adopt a new name that fits with her new personality and new holiness. At the same time, and this is solely, I do not want to offend anyone out there named Katie. But looking at the names...
Name of a common street
It's
whore.
a very common name. And being a common name, I'm not going to say it's the name of a common street whore, Hank.
I've never met a Katie who isn't. I'm kidding.
It's on the nature, though. You compare the names Katie and Maud. Ask any person in the world
for sure.
which name sounds more promiscuous.
Like the name Maud is like, I mean... and this is not to offend Mauds, it's not an attractive name.
It's not, no.
And I think that is so deliberate. Maud. It is, if you were asking me, like, paint a Maud, it's going to be someone who is, like, again, very homely, very modestly dressed. I'm not...
You know who I would paint someone from The Handmaid's Tale, one of the Marthas. I would paint a Martha.
Exactly. Yeah. There's not an Aunt Maud. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there is in that universe because that is very much that type of name. Yes, that's a great way to put it.
So that's very much what that is. And then you ask someone to paint a Katie, they're going to paint someone who's very vibrant, it's very lively. And so honestly, I think you have the surface level. She's changed her name to remove her pelt from the past, but she's also underneath changed her name because Katie is too much of a promiscuous name. She cannot go as Katie anymore. She has to now be pious and holy.
That person is dead,
and completely, aside from her sexual relationship with God, she has to be completely not sexual, so she cuts out everything and becomes Maud.
Because she is solely devoted.
Right. Her only relationship is with Jesus and God. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For sure. Can I note something that happened right before that? Is that it's a weird scene, and it's like Maud in the walls of Amanda's bedroom. Mm-hmm. She's putting holy water on the walls, and she says, let me see what she says. I had it.
With your pages of notes over there.
I can't help it.
I'm not mad about it.
She's talking to God while Amanda's asleep. She's putting holy water on the bedroom, and she says, she is at peace just as I was when I was first in your presence. She says it like she's saying that to God in the narrative sense, while putting holy water on the walls. I just think it goes back to her. She's smiling. She's satisfied. She clearly has, in my opinion, some sexual connection to Amanda, or just some like romantic, whether that be sexual. She has a fascination and fixation.
She has very much a fixation on Amanda. Yeah. Now, let me also ask you here. You mentioned the fact she's putting holy water on the walls. Is it in fact holy water? Because
Or is it acetone
it's
and hydrogen peroxide?
Every time we see her fill something up with
Yes,
water,
I know.
it's acetone.
That's
is
what
that
my
her
notes said at
holy
the time, and
water,
at the end I'm like,
I
don't know.
We
I
don't
simply
know,
don't know.
but
I don't know.
what do y'all think? Is it acetone? Is it water? I don't know, man. Because acetone becomes a very prevalent thing at the end of the movie.
She had a beautifully rich painted wall. I hope she wasn't putting acetone on.
Because that would definitely.
It was a green wall, I think.
Because she puts acetone on Amanda at the end of the film. I know. Is that her holy water? Is acetone because it burns? Is that you think what?
Maybe does it burn skin? I don't know.
I mean, I've put fingernail paint polish on before and taken it off, and it doesn't burn my skin.
Yeah.
But
so I mean, I don't know. I just don't know. I'm not a priest. Can we have can the Holy Roman Catholic Church, can the Holy Father, can the pontiff reach out and let us know if holy water is just acetone?
Is it just acetone?
Can you let us know?
I would hope it's not.
Fill in the comments below.
So this is
I don't know.
It's bizarre. Things here now.
It's bizarre.
Do you think the possibility of it being the holy water is because holy water, you looked at it through history of cinema, it burns demons.
Well, and that's, I mean, what is it? You purify things.
You're purifying it, yeah.
Fire.
Acetone is alcohol. It's like 100% alcohol, right?
Basically,
yeah. Like isopropyl.
It's an ethanol.
Ethanol, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm also not a scientist, guys. So it's cleansing, it's purifying.
Yeah. Right. I don't know. So that is a good point. Like, like the purification through fire, the cleansing. Is this just how Maud and her perverse understanding of religion takes to mean holy water? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
it's
it is
more
bizarre.
Of the unknown,
But I know, like, by the end of the film, I was like, maybe that wasn't holy water. Like,
I'm not quite sure. Yeah. So I don't know. So regardless, we kind of pass for a little bit more, and then let's skip to the party. Okay, let's talk about the party. Yeah, because you brought this up.
We don't get to talk about her slamming her fist down on a hot stove.
That's when this.
Did it happen?
It happens.
Yeah.
No, it does happen before the party. You're right. Yes,
but it's just really another act of self-flagellation that's caused by Carol's presence.
Exactly. So essentially, what happens? Because I'm sorry, I skipped over this. I thought this happened after the party, but you're right. It happens before. After Maud rids Amanda of Carol, sends her out. There's this day where Maud even she states herself, her phone has been silent all day. Yeah. It's been a great day because no one's called her or anything. There's even this moment, I love the little dynamic here where they're playing solitaire and Amanda clearly cheats. And she's just like, did I cheat?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And then her phone rings. And she's answering, she's like, she's happy because even I watch every movie with subtitles on. Even the subtitles 1000%. Said Amanda happily. It was like, I didn't expect to hear from you today. And so she talks to her and things start to turn.
Yes.
And that's when she sends Maud out. She's like, can you give me a moment, please? And we hear this kind of like dynamic back and forth to where Carol is now telling her, I can't be around anymore.
Yeah.
And we don't know if this is when Carol snitches on Maud.
We don't know.
But I would assume so.
I figured it wasn't, though, because I feel like her reaction would be more serious towards Maud if that had happened then.
Yeah.
But maybe she also is sort of
because when
Maud
comes
of this woman.
Right. When Maud comes back in,
she does need care, so I don't know.
When Maud comes back in, she's like, oh, let's go to the theater. And she straight up, Amanda's like, I'm going to bed. I want to go to bed.
Yeah, she does.
And Maud's like, it's 5 o'clock. She's like, don't tell me when I can go to bed. So I think it's possible that she's really hurt about Carol.
Because Carol was told to cut her off, or she cut her off and told her what happened.
Either way.
And I don't know at that
point.
But
either way, you're right. There's a scene where Maud's in the kitchen. She's like picking at her finger over the stove. And then to kind of punish herself for what she's done, she lifts up the lid of the stove, puts her hand down on it.
Yeah.
And pulls it away. And then she's got this nasty burn now on her hand for the rest of the film.
Yeah.
But yeah, the next morning they wake up and everything, and Amanda's happy again, and she's like,
this goes back to my self-harm thing versus the stretch marks. I mean, clearly Amanda in that state was not as composed as she typically is. So I really think that was just a drawback really quickly to her tendency to harm herself when she's not as composed, when she's much more into
kind
her
of in her
primal and
vulnerable
visceral self.
Yeah.
she has that tendency in that reaction. That's all.
She did have that instinct because she did pause for a second. Then she's just like, no.
Yeah, because you actually thought it was going to be your like palm down.
Thought, yeah.
And then like she pulls back and then just like goes down on it.
And I love they show it later on. And
and I could have done without that, but
it's a visceral burn. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gross. It's not pretty.
It's not pretty.
As someone who recently suffered a cooking burn.
Oh, did
In
you?
atonement with the show.
So we cut to the next morning, and Amanda's in a much more happy mood. She sends Maud out to go get some groceries for the party that night.
Yeah.
And then
Could you pick some things up?
Could you pick some things up for the party? Yeah. Going to town and get some things. And so we get into this scene later on whenever when Maud's putting together her cake, this woman comes in and just takes over for her. And so I think it goes to show again kind of the attitude everyone has towards Maud, including Amanda. It's very much just like, we don't need you. You can go now.
Whereas she felt that she and Amanda had this great connection that spanned a lot more than like a service.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like, oh, this woman made hors d'oeuvres. Like she had to make hors d'oeuvres for your birthday party. That she's
you're
really
turning
not
her
a part
into a
of.
servant. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I feel like that that is humiliating in a way, probably to her personally, to say like, oh my gosh, this person whom I thought I had this great connection is banished me to the kitchen.
Right. And actually, I have another note here I wanted to bring up. At this point, I really noticed it here at this point, because Carol does show back up. Carol's there at the party. And so Maud's kind of hurt by this. And then again, the vulnerability takes into where the lady comes into the kitchen, takes the cake away from Maud. Maud walks out into the parties. They're singing Happy Birthday to Amanda, and she's just shrouded in darkness.
Yes.
And this happens a lot with Maud's character. She's half dark, half light.
Yep.
And I think this is another moment here that Rose Glass is making to where we see that battle inside Maud. She's still battling her, old ways and trying to get rid of the darkness, but it's still taking back over her.
Right. She's definitely not living the perfect spiritual life that she would want.
Exactly.
These emotions are stemming up. She's feeling hurt. She's feeling isolated. She's
especially right
questioning
now
all these things. Yeah. And then, Carol walks into the party earlier and is just looking, fantastic.
Absolutely ravishing.
Yeah. And so where she likely has this sexual attraction to it, so human jealousy is coming into play. It's just like, it's an awful lot. And, Amanda even told Maud at the beginning, oh, you're prettier than the other one.
Right. And so there's definitely some like...
Yeah, like it was really well done how they're sort of leaving these questions about her.
That's... Yeah. We said, I'm excited to see what this director does in their future. The subtlety of this movie, it's so well done. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I respect the director for that.
Yeah.
Rather than just giving it to you, because I do think in modern films, the modern average moviegoer is like, I need answers now. If I don't have the answers now, I'm not going to pay attention long enough to figure it out myself. And this movie's like, you know what? Well, fuck you. Figure it out yourself.
Right. It's like what Scorsese said about Marvel movies. Like, I mean, I feel like that's what people want.
Instant gratification.
It's like a roller coaster ride. It's a thrill. It's enjoyment. You don't have to think much because it's all just laid out there.
Yes.
In a $500 million package for you.
Right.
Of CGI. And this is not that. This is something that's making you think a little bit. And I think that those are the types of film that I'm much more drawn to, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm not, and it's another thing of just like, particularly when we did Mandy, I was like, I didn't even know how I felt about the film until we had talked about it for 2 hours. And I still I feel like that's very much happening again with this, is like, I'm still like processing and thinking more about these different things and things I hadn't thought about.
Again, I've said this many times in the show before, but that's what I love the most about this show, I think, is you take these movies that make you think, and you're like, I don't know how I feel about that movie. But then after you sit here and you process it, you talk about it, you go in depth with it, you're just like, I understand it better now.
Absolutely.
Now I like it.
An appreciation of it, if nothing else.
Yeah. So at the party, Maud comes out and everyone's kind of like talking. And then we hear Amanda say,
it was quite... It's incredible because it's as if she was speaking it to Maud, but she wasn't.
She wasn't, yeah. She says, I don't know if she's bigoted or
jealous. I don't know if she's a bigot or if she's jealous.
Right, but she tried to get rid of Carol and everything. And she repeats it several times, too, as Maud walks closer and closer and everything. And we have this moment where, Amanda's basically just kind of attacking Maud.
And she says she did so to save my soul, if
Yep.
I understand correctly. So at that point, she is attacking her. She's publicly shaming her in this group, which again, you have like, there's rock music playing and all of these things that
Yeah.
one would traditionally associate with like, you know, sin and the demonic and whatnot. And these people, they're very, very artisty crowd of, you know, peculiar individuals. And Maud is dressed as Maud does,
yeah,
in,
she's
in
dressed
this
in her,
modest nursing outfit.
Yeah.
Like it's covering up her
all the way up
neck.
to here, yeah.
Her hair is pulled back, and
And then they even go a step further to take a napkin and turn it into a nun's bonnet.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, you know, like it's just they're mocking her and
They are.
shaming her.
And this is 100% out. There's no question about this. This is a moment in the movie where Amanda's openly mocking and shaming.
They are trying to make her feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this outsider in this group, and I think that anyone would respond. You know, like there's so many feelings one would have towards that, and it would be really hard and terrible. And I think that it really leads up to the next scene, which is, in a way, this is sort of like the climax of the. I mean, the movie has several climaxes, I suppose, but this is probably like.
I think
this is where it takes a definitive.
This is a definitive turn. I wouldn't say this is the climax of the film.
No,
because
yeah.
I think the climax of the film's coming up here in a minute. But this is definitely the first turning point of the film. This is where the film goes from we've been here for so long, and now we're gonna turn. And so the mockery continues, and eventually, you know, Maud can't take it any longer. She tries to back out. She tries to leave, and Amanda won't let her leave. And then before Maud slaps her, Amanda says, you know, don't take me seriously.
Right.
Don't take anything I say seriously. And then I forget the exact words she says, but she says something, again, that's just super offensive to Maud and mocks her religion.
How could we take anything seriously when we have the Heavenly Father's hard, warm pulsing?
Yep. And at that point, Maud slaps her because Amanda brings to the forefront the sexual feelings that Maud feels.
So she's mocking that. She's also revealing something in this context that's highly inappropriate. Just to again belittle her. I mean, there was no other reason to do it than to make her feel insignificant, make her feel bad. And she's revealing her most intimate relationship with God. And if you're a religious person, there's nothing more serious. And she's putting it out there in front of this group of people and putting it on display in a joking manner.
Right.
And something that she revealed, something, you know,
She's
she made herself
revealing-
very vulnerable to Amanda by even revealing that.
Right. And then Amanda's throwing it right back in her face in front of all these people she doesn't know. So
After they mocked her religion, they put her in the, you know, they tried to, I don't know what those are called.
the nurse's headdress. I don't know if
They
it's a
put
bonnet. I apologize
whatever
if it
those
is a
things
bonnet.
are called. Whatever a nun would traditionally wear. Yeah. It's
Open mockery. And so Maud can't take it any longer. And so she slaps Amanda. And
which, like, I think was a fair response.
oh yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
And so at that point, you know, Amanda's nose starts to bleed, and she kind of turns and looks, and she kind of smiles at her.
Yeah.
There's almost this moment of where like Amanda's like, "I've won now."
I've won, and it's like I've also got it out of you.
Yeah.
There you are. There you are.
There's the real you.
There you are.
Yeah.
Because in a way, and someone to like Amanda, and in a way to someone like me, this devotion that she has to her faith, it's oppressive, you know. And that's, I feel like Amanda, who's an artist, who exhibits so many of these human emotions and feelings and sexualities on stage, and that's what her, you know, raison d'etre is. She sees Maud as being repressed and oppressed by her religion. And she wants, just as Maud wants to help her, in a way, Amanda probably wants to help Maud. Now, she may want to do it for, you know,
for different reasons.
For shits and giggles.
Exactly.
But I think it is something that she wants.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point to take because it is this funny dynamic where they both are trying to help one another, but for vastly different
reasons.
Yeah. And so at this point, we cut to Maud in the employment agency's office. We kind of get this moment where Maud is obviously being fired. And the lady says, you know, it's lucky she's not pressing charges.
Right.
And then she says, Amanda expressed some, you know, concern for you. How is everything going? And Maud's just like, it's fine. Everything's fine. Because this right here is the moment Maud starts to break.
This is it. Yeah.
This is her breaking point. Yeah. It hasn't happened yet. She definitely is beginning to fall apart here, though.
What I think is interesting too is we get to this point where it's a break.
Yeah.
But it isn't a break, and it's not it's not really. At the same time, it's her losing her religion, while simultaneously in a part of her becoming more convicted to it than ever,
Right.
which is so complicated.
Yeah. This movie's full
It's
of
hard to
paradoxes.
explain. Yeah, like at the same
Yeah.
time, she's devolving as a human and clearly going deep into madness and losing a lot of the values of her faith. But at the same time, she's becoming more convicted in it than ever.
You said losing my religion, and I tried not to sing some REM. Or that was REM. Yes, it was REM. Yeah. It's just like
life bigger.
it's stuck in my head now.
Now the copyright, please.
Oh no, copyright, please. So yeah, we have this moment where she's starting to lose her religion, and we have this big moment at her house where, you know, she calls out and she's just like, "I don't know what you want from me. I'm now," what she says, I'm not unemployed, but I don't remember what she said. She's like unoccupied and unwanted or something, something like that.
Considers herself unemployable and unoccupied.
Yeah, unemployable and unoccupied. And she's like, "I don't know what you want from me. If you want something from me, let me know."
Yeah.
And she essentially gets no response. And so this is kind of the moment where
She
she's
sees
like,
another cockroach right around this time too, doesn't she?
no, it's later on. She's the
Okay.
cockroach.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the next time she calls out. No, because at this point she gets no response. And she's just like, this is essentially where she's just like, okay, so God, you have forsaken me. And she reverts back to her old ways. She, immediately shirks almost everything she's ever known.
She's in her bed.
Yeah.
She's writhing in pain too. Yeah. This is where she says, "I may have an ulcer."
Yeah.
Or appendicitis. Yeah.
Yeah. And then she goes out for a night on the town.
Then she goes out. Yeah.
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 And so this part where she goes out in the town is starkly different to what we've seen before, because where Maud has been very, humble and, modest in the way she looks, now she's wearing this slinky night dress and she's got a face full of makeup and her hair, is all volumized and everything.
Yeah.
So it's a drastically different look than what we've seen her
And
before.
her apartment had become filthy.
Exactly.
The apartment, which was once so spotless, has become so dirty. And she says to God, "Perhaps you aren't as wise as I thought."
Yes.
In the narrative voice, like the Maud speaks as the narrator through her prayer, I would guess, is probably in the way
I
is like
would say the narration is her prayer.
Yeah.
Her praying, yeah.
praying.
Her praying. And then also too, before we get to the out where she goes out for the town, that's also the scene where she's picking at her scab.
Yes. Oh.
And there's when she gets back to her apartment, she doesn't put the crucifix back up on the wall. She leaves it on the dresser. And as she's picking at her scab, we get that, I don't remember the kind of shot's called, but it's a shot where she's in focus and the scene behind her is in focus. It's a double shot, but it's like, I forget what the technical term is for it. But she's picking at it and then the cross falls off the shelf. Mm-hmm. And I think she kind of takes it as, I think it's a sign. She takes it as a sign from God, yes, but I think it's also a sign that God has left her.
In her mind, she has lost, she no longer has that orgasmic connection.
Yeah.
And you can tell. I mean, she's disheveled, she's unwell, she's unhappy, she says she's sick. And she says, if this is how you treat your most loyal subjects, how do you treat those who shun you?
Yes, and I love that line because it's...
But in her mind, she knows.
Yeah.
And that's the woman up on the hill with stage 4 lymphoma of the spine. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. It's interesting.
So we cut to the pub, and the pub scene... It's drastically different than what we've seen before. Again, it's a stark contrast to what we've seen before in both, tone of the film and also Maud's appearance, because Maud is, for all intents and purposes, Katie again.
She's Katie.
Yep, she comes back out. Her hair's down. She gets herself a beer. She goes out and immediately makes eyes with this dude across the bar.
She does.
She does. She walks up. She makes these eyes to the dude across the bar. She just sits there smiling at him and staring at him. And she stares him down the whole time. Like, she does not break eye contact. And this guy looks at her. She's sitting there. She's got her drink. She's like sipping on it. She's like, hey.
She eye fucks him.
Yeah, definitely. And he's looking back. He even talks to his friend. He's just like, hey, look at the girl over there. I think she's into me. And she does not break eye contact. She's straight up just like looking him straight down.
Now, whereas most of us would find that horrifying and unnerving,
this guy's into it because next thing we know, he's getting a handy in the bathroom.
Classic Katie.
I love the disconnect here because this is clearly a meaningless fling.
Yeah.
She's solely here looking for some kind of just in the moment pleasure because she gives this guy a handy. he finishes, she just wipes her hand off and walks out.
And she's clearly seeking through alcohol or these human conditions, like what she had with God.
Yeah.
I think.
No, definitely.
That's how I was taking it. She's trying to find that, because again, her relationship with God is sexual.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly.
And also too, we've talked about this before, but Katie is a very lonely person, and I think I don't want to give away my ending analysis of this film, but I'm going to do it here anyway because I'm going to forget about it. I don't have it in my notes because I just now this has come to me as we've talked.
Grown.
I think truly the central idea of this film is relating to the fact that she is a lonely person, and she found that connection with God, and then when she lost it, everything went to shit. And so she's seeking that. She's constantly seeking that relationship. Her whole life, she's been seeking some kind of connection with something real. And this was the first time it's ever felt real.
Yeah, for sure.
And so now she's back. That's why, and I'm all sex positivity. You do what you want to do. But I feel like that's, often a motif for people who sleep around a lot.
And especially the movie has religious tones.
Yeah.
The movie is talking about religious perceptions, and religion is not typically sex positive.
Right. But it's, you're seeking that connection that you can never find. You're going from person to person trying to find that connection.
Right.
And here she's found that connection.
Well, and what's so interesting is she goes back to her table after giving a handy in the bathroom, and the people next to her are laughing and having a good time, and she's listening as if she's part of their group and starts laughing along and catches herself.
Yeah. And then she backs away from it.
Because she's just longing for some sort of connection or belonging to something. And she found that really closely.
Because the
after
people
something
even are
that clearly happened traumatic in her life.
Right.
There's a point there. And I mean, at this point, we don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But there was something that changed,
And so she's seeking that connection. And so therefore she found it with God. And when he turned his back on her, that's when everything, she's like, I'm right back where I was. So why even try?
Why try?
So after she, finishes with the dude in the bathroom, he walks out and he just straight up leaves. He's like, I'll see you later, and walks out.
But he looked unnerved.
Yeah, he did. But I also love the fact, too, we don't really see his face. We see him from about neck down, and he's just like, okay, I'll see you later, and walks out. He grabs his friend, and they leave.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's just more symbolization on the fact that there's no connection there. He is a faceless person.
Right. That's a really good point. I hadn't necessarily thought about that.
Yeah, that she just, hooked up with, and now he's gone.
Yeah.
And then she has that moment with the group next to her. She starts laughing, and she catches herself and backs off. She goes to the bar, takes some shots, and then goes to the bathroom to call Joy.
Yeah.
And again, we get another moment of rejection here because she calls Joy, and at first Joy's like, yeah, sure, I'll come out. But then Katie or Maud, being drunk, and also too, I think as well, being kind of an anxious person who is very much like, I can't believe someone actually wants to be with me, is like, has to ruin it. She's like, I thought it was weird you wanted to be, hang out with me because you never seemed to like me before.
Yeah.
And that's when Joy's like, maybe actually we'll take a rain check on this. I'm not feeling so good. Yeah. And so it's just another form of rejection. Yeah. That fucks with Maud's head, and she goes out and runs into this dude, and she spills his beer, and he's like, oh, you owe me another beer now. And we immediately cut to them in bed having sex.
Yep.
And so it's another one of those seeking
but the
connection.
reason she ran into him though is because she started to see these whirlpools in all the beer.
Yeah.
So
I forgot to mention that part. Yeah.
Not to reveal too much of my ending, but the woman is experiencing psychosis.
Exactly.
Her mind is very unwell, and but to her, those are signs from God. Those are something more. And
this is like a warning sign essentially because she starts seeing it in everyone's drink, and like the tornado or vortex in her drink. Yeah. And so she crashes into this dude, spills his beer.
And she becomes hypersensitive. Again, there's that scene that makes you so uncomfortable with these close-ups on people's faces while they're drinking and laughing.
Crunching chips and everything. Yeah.
But I think that where you mentioned that the city and the bar and those are humanity, that was that scene to me. That was when you said that, my mind immediately went to that scene of these people in their grotesqueness.
Because people are gross.
Humans. But especially compared to God.
Right. Yeah.
It's disgusting in our humanity. And so I think that that's how I would sort of
bring that up. And I want to ask you a question now. This is, again, not in my notes. I just thought of this because, religious background of mine that I know. You bring up the fact that compared to God, humanity is grotesque and humanity is, vile. If you take what the Bible says, God created us in his image. Okay? In God's eyes, we're not necessarily grotesque or vile. In Satan's eyes, though, he saw us as these.
So that's something interesting. Well, but though at the same time you could say that God created man. Well, first off, biblical lesson: God created Adam and Eve equal, or He created Adam and Lilith.
Yeah.
Then she fled. Then Eve was created from man inherently, creating this doctrine of woman being of man and inherently lesser. But they were also corrupted by sin. So what was this perfect image of humanity that was made in God was corrupted.
Yeah.
So I definitely see where you're going, and I think that probably more ascribes to like how I would take the ending if it did have a more literal.
My ending has nothing to do with Satan. I'll let you know that right now. My interpretation of this ending of the film has nothing to do with Satan.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I definitely think, when we talk about sin and we talk about, the corruption of humanity, you have to bring into consideration Satan,
sure.
Especially in a thing like this. We're talking to such a religious aspect,
bar.
right?
They're in,
And so I think at this moment where she is falling so far away from God's grace, she's entering more and more into Satan's territory, and she starts seeing what Satan thinks of people.
Yeah.
So it's just another moment. I think I could be completely wrong. It's just another way to interpret the scene here. So
Very true. No, I see that.
yeah. And then, again, continuing on with the sin, we cut straight into them having sex. This man and Maud. And this is where we get, the final piece of Maud's backstory. This is it doesn't fill it in completely. We have, again, like I said, a 1,000-piece puzzle. This is our 800th piece here.
Yeah.
The rest of it we got to figure out. But they're having sex, and she has her hands on his chest, like in a CPR, like a CPR situation. And she's pushing down. And in this moment, we're cutting in and out between her and the hospital. Mm-hmm. And then we cut back to him, and she pushes down, and his chest collapses.
She cracks his sternum, and blood shoots out of his mouth.
Yeah. And it's a visceral scene.
It was I was like, what?
It's very jarring because you don't expect it really at first. It's just very much just like, oh my God, like, wow.
Yeah, because again, it is cutting back between like them, having sex, and she has her hands on his chest while she's on top of him, to like the CPR, and it's then just like it
interchanges between her and the hospital. Yeah.
And the chest cracks,
and she freaks out, and that's pretty much all we get from her backstory, and we just kind of figure in the pieces here. That's what happened to her patient. She was giving CPR to a patient, and she pushed in, the chest cracked, and her patient died from it.
I've always heard you're supposed to make it doesn't work if you.
I've had CPR training before, and they said, that happens the majority of the time. If you're giving someone chest compressions, their chest will crack.
Right.
I think
that was a little intense. It was an intense cracking of one's chest,
and I think that's what the issue was here. I think the patient she had was elderly, and so
just like feeble.
Yeah, so much pressure just cracked too far in.
Yeah,
and killed her. So I think that's what the main issue was, and that's it
was a rough one.
Yeah, the whole Maud's backstory there. And then we get this uncomfortable scene where Maud's, she's obviously not wanting to continue on with the sex, but the guy wants to finish. And so he climbs on top of her as she's laying there, completely out of it at this point. Yes. And he finishes, and then we cut to a scene where he's laying in bed smoking a cigarette, and he says, I recognized you. And she doesn't say anything, and he's like, I remember seeing you out and about before. I think you hooked up with my friend.
Yeah.
I
hadn't taken a note of that, but now I remember that.
And so he's kind of relating to what Katie used to be known as. And so that, I think in that moment with him telling her he knew her, it was the final straw for her. I think this was the moment where she completely breaks. Because at this point she goes back to her apartment, and that's when the fireworks start going off. She throws up, goes into like a seizure.
Yeah.
It's a very visceral scene in terms of like, it's very visually.
It's very, absolutely. I feel like, what I took that as is, her reaching this low point, her saying, oh, I recognize you. She's not Maud anymore. She is completely Katie.
Exactly.
And she chooses to return to Maud in her mind.
Yeah.
And you're right. She pukes it up. It is this like
It's a projectile
very graphic
vomit.
scene of
Yeah.
her rejecting the alcohol, the sin, whatever, you know, as that would be represented. She shoots that out, you know. Then the fireworks start, and she literally levitates.
She levitates up off the ground. Yeah, it's just this scene of. It's literally a scene of almost revival mixed in with like revelation and everything. It's
And I take it dissension. She's descending even further into,
because she when she wakes up, she is no longer, Katie's completely gone out of her mind, and the what Maud was left in her is now, it's broken.
something that I wrote that I hadn't, like, I'm glad I remembered, is that the absence of God almost left her in a state of withdrawal, as if she were an addict. Mm-hmm. That's how she's responding. She didn't have God, and she's having these withdrawal symptoms. She's puking. She's convulsing. She's,
it's like
her mind is not working.
A drug withdrawal.
Yeah, she desperately needs it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's and hopefully
I said after it is an epiphany and a revelation.
Yeah, it really truly is though. This is the moment, the climax of the film for me. This right here is the climax of the film.
Okay. And she says,
in my mind,
so where she starts to clean the apartment.
Yeah, because she then wakes up the next day, cleans everything,
and she says, for shame, she almost fell so easily.
Mm-hmm. And
this is the most uncomfortable scene.
Here's where we get the scene that makes my skin crawl, because she has to atone for the sins that she's committed.
Rose glass. My therapist is going to send you a bill.
I don't get squeamish easy. I've seen a lot of horror movies, and things haven't. I can watch Saw no problem.
Yeah.
But this scene is so realistic and done not graphically, but done well enough to make my skin crawl. What she does is she takes pictures of Mary Magdalene, cuts them out, pokes thumbtacks through them, puts them in the base of her shoe, puts her feet in, looks up at her crucifix, and stands up.
Oh my God, thinking about it's like making me uncomfortable.
And it is the most uncomfortable thing in the whole movie. It's the most uncomfortable scene in the whole movie.
But I think they somehow make it more uncomfortable.
Because she starts walking around town.
When she's walking around town.
Yeah, and her shoes are her feet are bleeding
you
through the
hear
shoe.
the blood
crunchy.
sloshing, the sloshing in her shoes. I am not okay.
The captions literally said crunch every time she took a step, and I was like, why? Oh God.
But that is, that's, I don't want to say it's common, but it is a noted piece of devotion that people have exhibited.
Yeah. Yeah.
To, try and atone themselves and become one with the pain Christ felt, or whatever it is, and punish themselves for their transgressions. But oh man, what a way to do it!
What a way to do it!
I'll kneel on some corn kernels any day before that.
Yes. And I think honestly, the thing that gets me the most about it is I have a thing with, like, I'm going to say this, and y'all going to be like, oh, gross. I have a thing with feet, not like a sexual fetish thing, but like anything that happens with feet. The only thing other than this that's maybe squirm this bad, I think, was when I watched Hostel for the first time.
Yeah.
And they cut the guy's Achilles tendons.
Yeah.
My Achilles tendon, like ankle and foot things, make me squirm so badly. Like, oh no, I don't like it. I don't want it.
I don't like it.
I don't like it. So we have that scene, and then, since we have some time passing, I'm trying to remember anything important, because we do meet. We get to the point where Amanda has a new caretaker.
Yeah, and Maud goes, and she's like on the beach, and there's like a, one of those like scenery spyglass things, and she's
watching
looking up
the house.
at the mansion.
Yeah,
she's like watching the mansion like a
because
weirdo.
she has this fascination with Amanda. She can't let it go, and I'm torn between thinking it's two things. It's her fascination with her on Katie's side, and it's her fascination with Amanda on, I have to save this woman. This woman needs my help.
Well, I truly think that it is her basic human instinct, which is Katie, is this sexual attraction and dynamic that she has with Amanda. But she is no longer Katie. She is Maud. So that presents itself through this desire to save her.
Right.
She was this unhealthy fascination with saving her soul.
Yeah.
And that's what, but to someone who's deeply convicted in their religion, like, what greater obligation can you have than to, she feels like she's in charge of someone's eternal soul.
Yep, she has to save her.
Yeah, she has to. That's a concept that we don't understand. Forever, eternity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that's not an easy pill to
It's
swallow.
not an easy pill to swallow,
if
no.
you're that deeply convicted in it, then I feel like
Yeah. And so we know that Amanda has a new caretaker. And so Ma just one day happens to be out walking and just stumbles across the new caretaker.
Yeah.
It's so,
She's like having her lunch on the pier.
Yeah, having her lunch on the pier. She's like, mind if I sit down? And this her name's Esther, right? I believe Esther.
What biblical name?
Yeah. And she's super nice and kind. And she's like, yeah, go ahead, have a seat. And they start talking about how, like, Esther's a nurse. And Maud pretends like she has so much, she's like, I respect nurses so much. It's
the most noble thing you can do.
Yep, most noble thing you can do. She's like, how do you have any time for yourself? And Esther's like, oh, I have choir practice, it's I have my time, I have my life. And it's just this moment where I'm trying to think the purpose of this, and I think it's mostly because I think Katie had an issue with finding her time when she was a nurse and finding herself. I'm trying to find a way to say this to make sense. She was so caught up in her job, but at the same time, she was caught up in her own life. She couldn't find a way for the two to mesh, and that's why I think she fell out of the nursing career and then was like, I have to get rid of that social life now to make myself,
Yeah, she couldn't have a complete life as a nurse.
Right.
She didn't have fulfillment, and what she had was, these meaningless hookups to her and these drunken revelry, and that because it was either the devotion to her career, that was probably the way to cope with all the hard things she was experiencing. And
Right.
seeing, yeah, and she never found that balance and joy in the career and profession. And
so that's what she's trying to get from Esther here. Is trying to figure out, how are you doing this?
Yeah.
So we have this conversation, and then we also learn too through this, because Esther can't really give whole many details, but she does reveal, she has a good relationship with this person she's taking care of.
Yeah.
They're very close. They have this great relationship. And Ma's just like, that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you all.
So happy for you.
Yeah. And so, she gets Esther's name, and then at that point, Esther turns, she's like, oh, what's your name? And Ma just gets up and walks away.
Before she says, the person I'm caring for, she doesn't have much time left.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if it was, I think it's a combination of one, Maud feeling this jealousy and this envy towards their relationship, but also she doesn't have much time to carry out this thing that she feels God wants her to do, and that's save Amanda. So the urgency is also ignited within her.
Exactly. Yeah. And so she gets up, she goes home, and you kept mentioning the Welsh thing earlier, so this is where we're going to get into this. So she goes home, she prays once again for guidance. She prays, give me a sign, please. And it's at this point she sees the beetle or the roach again. And it crawls over to her like shrine, her like little area where she's got her altar. Yeah, altar's a better word, not shrine, altar. It crawls in, and this light like pulsates from the altar, and we hear God's voice talking to her in Welsh.
Yes. Which I'm just like, what an interesting
choice.
Well, one, I have to say, again, the miracle of subtitling. I would probably never have known that was Welsh.
I wouldn't have either known it was Welsh,
I just wouldn't have known. But I was like, huh. And I take that to mean a couple of things. Okay. One, and the one that I most likely ascribe to, is that, again, Maud's relationship with God is a manifestation of her own mental unwellness. Yeah. And so that is just simply how it's manifesting. But then I think you could also, I think the other piece that's probably less likely, but I think is fun to think about, is Welsh culture particularly is really, really akin to paganism and Druidism.
Okay.
The island of Anglesey off the coast of Wales is like where Druidism was like most prevalent in the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom has a really rich pagan history. So how much of it is this some tempting demon? Is this the devil present or some concept of a devil or a tempter who has been leading her through these things? I mean, it's something to think about, particularly as the fact that she comes every time she has a relationship with God. Maybe this is just a demon that's fucking with her.
True.
Something to think about. I don't know. That's not really the track that I take, but yeah, I'm still very curious about the choice of Welsh.
So taking it from a supernatural aspect and bringing it back to a reality aspect here. From what I found online, God's voice is Maud, but pitch shift down.
Oh.
The actress voiced God.
Interesting.
So, if you take that in consideration,
It's definitely her own craziness.
it's her own crazy. It's her mental break
You're
here.
crazy as shit.
She's talking to herself,
Which is sort of what I thought,
And
even
I-
without having realized.
and I think
definitively.
that might be why God is Welsh, because if she's talking to herself, if she's speaking English, it won't have that connection. But if it's a different language,
Right.
then it's not her talking,
And she could be Welsh. I mean, we again, like, we don't know
Right,
per
we
se
don't
that
know.
she's not.
I mean, because like the UK, there's people from all over the UK who are, from England and from Scotland and Ireland. They're all mixed in there together. So, yeah, I don't know,
Yeah,
but
I don't know.
it's definitely a scene here to where we have Maud talking to God, but also to herself
Yes.
about what her mission is. And she says, "How will I know what to do?" And God says, "You've known all along. You've known this whole time."
Yes.
And so we cut then to Maud getting dressed in this.
She takes the sheet off her bed.
Yeah.
She literally takes the sheet off of her twin-size bed.
And turns it into a shawl for herself, puts her rosary beads on.
Yeah. Picture like your old school image of like a friar from like Robin Hood.
Yes.
Like it is this very humble. It looks like she's wearing a feed sack. Mm-hmm. It's
And she's preparing herself for her final task, her final chance at saving Amanda's soul. And so as she's doing this, we get a knock at the door, and Joy is there. And Joy comes in, and it's this very uncomfortable scene because Maud's not talking at all.
no.
She doesn't say anything, and
Never
Joy's
says anything.
yeah, she says
quite
nothing
like-
because Joy's asking these questions, and Joy's just taking this as I know you're going through a tough time. I know you were going through a tough time, and we
Yeah.
weren't there for you whenever the whole thing happened at the hospital.
like it wasn't your fault. Like
Right.
it
It
wasn't
happens.
fair. Right.
It wasn't
Yeah.
fair for us to treat you the way we treated you. And I apologize for that. So she's apologizing for all these past traumas, and at this point, when she's finally apologizing for everything, Maud then comes over and kind of blesses her. She says, "God be with you" and everything, and kind of kisses her on the cheek, and then sends her on her way. And I think there was a disconnect there until Joy apologized. Because when she apologized and said, "I know what you're going through, I understand," that created a connection that Maud's been looking for this whole time.
Yeah.
And it's at that point she can truly bless Joy and be content with her in her life.
right. Very much.
So, yeah, so Joy gets sent on her way. We have this final moment between them. And then Maud prepares for her final, her final task. And that's by filling up bottles with acetone.
Holy water.
Holy water, yes.
Yeah.
So Maud waits around till night, and then she goes to Amanda's house. And here, Maud waits for Esther to leave, and then she enters the house, and she ascends to Amanda's room. And we find Amanda in complete,
It's very apparent she's the palliative care. She's at the end stage of
she's
her life.
very much the end of her life.
She is on
yes.
painkillers likely, and
Yeah,
just,
she's on oxygen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very apparent that she's
Walk
not
past
long.
the Coney Island sign to get there.
She does walk past the Coney Island sign again, yes.
Again.
And so we have this moment where when Maud walks in, Amanda makes direct eye contact with her and just watches her. She walks across the room, and Maud walks over and puts her hand on Amanda's cheek, and Amanda reaches up and grabs her hand. And we have this moment of seemingly everything's going to be okay. It's this false
it's consolation.
Yeah, it's this false hope of consolation to where Amanda apologizes for treating Maud the way she did. She says she's sorry for how she acted. And Maud responds, it's okay. God forgives things that are said in anger.
Yes.
And she's like, God has forgiven you and everything. And Amanda starts to laugh.
Yeah.
And Amanda's like, God's not real. He doesn't exist. Stop
Yeah.
fooling yourself.
I'm sorry I'm the one to break it to you this way.
Yeah.
Right.
She's like, I'm sorry to break it to you this way. It's not true.
And at the same time, she was using the chemical.
Yeah, she kept putting the
She was
acetone.
performing the last rite.
Yeah, and
you know,
it's like you hear it sizzling too.
yeah, yeah.
So it's I keep stuttering here. It is a representation of Amanda being a demon,
right.
I think, because Maud is this innocent one, and you said Carol's like the only evil person in this movie. I think also too Amanda's in Maud's eyes here at this point
Sure,
is evil
by Carol's influence,
right?
But yes, yeah. I mean, she definitely.
But also through what Amanda did at
she's
the party.
She's surely tainted by sin, and yeah,
exactly. And so Maud keeps trying to put this holy water on her, and she's like wincing away from it and everything. She tells her God's not real, and Maud says, you know, he's forgiven you. You don't have to do this anymore. We felt his presence together. We felt him inside of us. And Amanda says, I felt nothing.
right,
I faked that whole thing.
yeah.
And it's at this point Maud
Just
snaps. She breaks down. She starts crying. Like it's like this, not crying, but like this look of horror on her face.
absolute rage in a way. Yeah,
It's like how dare you perverse my God this way.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as Amanda's talking, her face shifts, and I'm not gonna lie, I jumped a little bit at this scene.
Oh yeah,
I wasn't expecting. It's very quiet.
I was not
and calm,
expecting this to happen.
and then Amanda turns into a demon, like
Yep.
legitimate, like demon. Her face is like distorted.
her
voice becomes deeper,
warbled,
and I don't have the exact. I wish I had the exact quote written down because she like crawls across the bed because she throws Maud back against the window, and then she crawls across the bed and she says, something about how she's so lonely, and if she truly found, her religion is a mockery and a falsity, because if she truly believed in God and found peace with God, she would not be this lonely person that she sees before her. Her religion is as weak as she is.
yeah,
Is essentially
Yeah.
what she says. And it's at that point that Maud snaps even more than she already has before. She calls her a demon. She grabs a pair of scissors off the dresser and just viciously stabs Amanda to death.
just starts
Going to town. And again, this is another great job by the director of showing a very graphic, visceral scene in a realistic and also not overtly graphic way. Like, obviously, there's a lot of blood and everything, but
Sure, yeah,
it's done in a very, very. I like the way it was done, because after she's done stabbing her, she stabs the scissors into her neck a final time and backs away, and Amanda kind of like gurgles and coughs one last time before finally sighing and just like death overcoming her, and she dies. And it's cathartic for Maud.
she's done something. She's done what she should, and she's in her mind. Amanda was clearly possessed by whatever, and she's exorcised that demonic force away, and she's now
given Amanda that glorification that she
Right.
wanted. She has saved her soul from the
she
demons.
has done what she wanted, and they show this. And as they leave, it's Maud is floating, literally like
She's floating off the
We
ground.
got the flying nun going on.
Yeah.
yeah. She the wind is billowing through her hair. She's off the ground. Her arms are outreached, almost as if she were in the position of the cross.
She's floating off the ground, and then she goes home to wash the blood off of her. And as she's washing the blood off of her, she turns around and she has these angel wings protruding from her back. So she has fully ascended at this point. She has fully achieved what she was meant to do. She has saved Amanda's soul from the devil by killing her. And so therefore she has accomplished her task and become what God wanted her to become.
Right. She truly views herself in this great heroic role to the point where she considers herself an angel. Yeah.
And then we have the end scene.
Yeah.
So the next morning, Maud wakes up and dresses herself again in her robe or her shawl, her bed sheet, her rosary beads, and she grabs the jug of acetone and walks down to the beach. And
she sees in the sky the inversion of what she saw in the beer glasses, whereas it was this vortex going down. There's a vortex going up off of the coast, right on the beach.
It's in the sky, just circling above them, and it's going up into the sky. And she walks out to the edge of the water, and she takes the acetone, and in front of all these people, begins to douse herself in acetone.
Just covers herself.
And someone even says in the background, someone stop her.
Someone says someone stop her.
But then it cuts to the people and they're all watching in awe. It's almost as if they're all like,
it's a change of perspective.
It is
how I took it. We were seeing a glimpse of reality. And then we go to Maud's
perspective,
reality.
yeah. And in Maud's reality, everyone's watching her in awe at what she's doing. And she takes her lighter, which, mind you, the lighter she's flicked several times throughout this film has never lit. This is the first time it's ever lit.
Yeah.
So she flicks it, lights, and she engulfs herself in flames. And we have these beautiful angel wings floating from her back as she lights herself on fire.
And then the crowd of people on the beach are organized.
Yep.
They fall down
fall down their knees
genuflection
in awe and reflect on her. Yeah.
Which is quite interesting because, you know, the Catholic theory of angels, or really the Christian theory of angels, is not what we think of as angels.
No, I know, right?
They're these horrifying in a lot of ways, or all
They're
awful. I say awful in the sense of full of all.
Yeah.
You know, these things that are insane to behold and often aflame, and
and that's also too why the angels always said, "Be not afeared." You know, because they know that they're humans, they're kind of terrifying
they're
looking.
These terrifying creatures.
Yeah.
And so, like the light is bright and her wings are outstretched and she's on fire. And
it's honestly very representative of, Blake's paintings.
Yes.
It ties right back in with his paintings because there's a lot of paintings that he's done where people are on fire.
Yep.
And it's also, equivalent to of a phoenix. So we want to go into the mythology here with a phoenix.
That's a good point.
This is her, burning herself to be reborn anew.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we have this very beautiful, majestic scene where she has these angel wings and everything. People are watching on in awe. And then for a split second, before we cut to black, we cut to reality. And it is a grisly, graphic reality of Maud screaming in agony as she burns alive. And we cut to black.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the movie.
I just had chills when you described it, and I get that scene is less than a second.
It literally is like less than a second. Yeah,
frames, and it's just so poignant. How it's I don't know. That's what that scene more than anything earns it the title of a horror film.
Absolutely, it's. This 100%, again, you said it yourself, this isn't a traditional horror film. It's definitely like a psychological, thriller.
As you said, like a character study.
It's a character study, 100%, yeah.
I don't know, that end scene was just quite incredible. It was really well done.
I love the ending of this movie.
I did too.
I love it so much
Absolutely
because,
adored it.
Again, we have the juxtaposition, we have the paradox between, Maud's reality and Maud's inside of her head.
Yeah, and again, the significance of it and the religious symbolism. I mean, immolation has been a practice for millennia, and particularly in other Buddhisms and other Eastern religions. But yeah, it's just this.
It's visceral.
It was hard to watch.
It was,
in the best way ever.
And I love the way it was done because you're right. It was like a split second. You see it for 2-3 frames.
If it had been any longer, it wouldn't have been as impactful, I don't think. I think it was really excellent.
The way it was done so well to where you understand immediately what the reality is. You don't need any more than that.
You don't need any more. Yeah, and I think that end scene also encapsulates what sort of steered my hot take of the film, which is it's really just a study of this girl's descent into madness.
Absolutely.
Her breaking point was literally the breaking. And the rest is just this psychotic delusion that's so closely linked to religion. Yeah. Which is a social commentary in itself of a lot of people, the way that people connect to religion and the fanaticism around it and the harm that it does. And I think the director did a really great job of showcasing that. And it's just a good movie.
It's a good movie.
I slept on it. I feel like it hasn't got the credit it deserves. And I think,
this is definitely an underrated film right now, I think. Yeah. I think, like I said with Midsommar, I think this is one of those movies where you watch it. This is not for your modern average viewer. This is a movie that if you were to put on at a slumber party with some friends or something like that, they'd be like, what the fuck are we watching right now? Yeah. This is a movie that you either watch by yourself or with someone like, Hank and I who enjoy movies like this to where we would understand the connotations and the deeper implications of these films.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And then have these discussions afterwards. That's what, I don't even know how long we've been recording right now. Like 2 hours?
2 hours.
Yeah. So we talked 2 hours for about an hour and 20-minute movie. But that's what we do on this show, guys. You all love it by now. You guys should know. We've been doing this for over a year now. You guys should know by now. This is what we do on this show.
This is crazy.
So that brings us to the end of our discussion, I think, on this movie. But before we finish that up, I've said my overall analysis of what I think this film means. What do you think this film means?
I think it's really it continues William Blake's theory that modern and organized religion has a lot of ills to it, and that it ultimately is not really a good thing, and that fanaticism, modern and organized religion can breed fanaticism in a very unhealthy way.
Absolutely.
And I think that Maud is sort of the showcase and the victim of that, and in a way, she's the final girl of her own story.
She really is, even though she ultimately does die.
Yeah.
She definitely is the final girl of her own story here.
But given her conviction, like, death is only the beginning.
Exactly. And for that reason, what you just said right there, I think it's perfectly fair that we rank her on the final girl scale.
For sure.
Because usually if we have, if our final girl dies and no one survives the film, we usually don't rank final girls here. But I think we can go right ahead and hop into the ranking of our final girl here on Maud. So,
Okay.
Hank, on a scale of S to F, how well do you think Maud fared against her oppressors and antagonists within this film?
I think she succumbed in the end. I don't think we can say that she didn't. However, I do think it gets a little complicated because the reality of her convictions and the reality of a lot of religious convictions, like, it was a success in some ways. I think that ultimately she was a victim of herself and a victim of her illness, but she can count it as a success. Like, she did what she wanted. She thought of her. She was a woman. She was a girl boss. Really, if you think about it, Maud is the perfect girl boss. She had goals and she achieved them.
She did achieve her goals. So where are you putting her at?
So what is my range? This is my first time getting a final girl.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So S, A, B, C, D, F. S being the best, F being the worst.
Okay.
Like S is superior, like above A.
I'm gonna say D.
You're gonna say D?
I mean, she died. She burned herself
for death.
in a very, very terrifying way. A way that I think I would very much not like to die.
Yeah.
She ultimately is gonna perish. I mean, we didn't actually see her die, but let's be real.
She did.
Homegirl dead, and and in a way, she's a victim.
Absolutely.
She's a victim of a lot of things.
She's a victim of mental trauma and a victim of just this society. This is a different take on the societal pressures than what the Joker gave us. It's very much similar in that aspect to where this kind of outcast.
Yeah. So I would have to give her a D. Yeah, I don't think she did too great.
Okay. I'm gonna rank her on two separate things.
Okay. All right.
I'm gonna rank physical Maud. Mm-hmm. Actually, I take this back. I'm gonna rank Maud and I'm gonna rank Katie.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Katie she's a D. Yeah. I don't think she doesn't overcome anything. She succumbs to all of her sins. She, falls flat on everything she's ever wanted to do. She doesn't succeed in this movie. And then she dies in the end.
Rip.
I'm going to rank Maud in an A, though, because Maud achieves what she sets out to do. Maud overcomes her oppressors. She defeats the demons inside Amanda. She defeats the demons inside herself. She defeats Katie.
That is a good way to think about it, because I mean, Katie's failures are Maud's successes,
right?
So yeah, that's interesting.
And so I think Maud succeeds in what she sets out to do, and in her death, you said death is just the beginning.
Yeah,
she achieves her goals, so therefore I think she deserves an A. So Maud gets an A, Katie gets a D.
Try and be best, Katie.
Try and be better, Katie. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of our discussion of Saint Maud. Hopefully you all enjoyed that. Hank, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Always a good time having you on the show.
Absolutely. Glad
to
be here.
It's been a minute, so tell people where they can find you on the internet.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Hank Oliver or Instagram, HP Oliver.
All right. Guys, Final Girl Podcast is brought to you by 13 Palm Trees Podcast Productions. You guys can check them out anywhere you get your podcasts. They got a bunch of different shows that are fantastic, such as D&D Kinda, Video Game Mythos, Gurus of Gaming, and Wasted Local Talent. If you guys want to know more about the Final Girl Podcast, you can check us out on Facebook.com/Final Girl Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Final Girl Podcast. And if you want to support the show, check us out at Patreon.com/Final Girl Podcast. I love every single one of you guys who support the show out there. You guys are fantastic. Thank you all so much for that support, because this show does run solely on that support from you all. So you guys rock. Thank you all so much. And even if you don't support the show on Patreon, if you're just listening or watching this, you guys are awesome too. I love you all so much for doing this. So thank you guys so much. Hank, thank you so much once again for being on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys.
I hope to be back.
Absolutely. You're going to be back for sure. That's all we got for you guys today. Until next time, guys, take it easy.
like this end when the final girl kills the main bad guy and the credits roll.